Hi, I'm really glad you're here. This is an original story from Tales Fair. If you enjoy family drama with a little mother bear energy, then you are in the right place. All right, let's get into it. People think you can feel when you're about to become the villain in someone else's story. Like you'll get a warning, a dramatic soundtrack, a sign from the universe. Nope. For me, it started with groceries. Not the fun kind, not the leisurely stroll down the artisanal cheese aisle where you debate between aged Gouda and a sharp cheddar with a glass of wine waiting at home. It was the kind of grocery shopping that happens at 10:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, under the clinical, buzzing hum of fluorescent lights that make everyone look like they are in the early stages of liver failure. I was standing in the cereal aisle of a Brooklyn supermarket, the air conditioning blasting a frigid Arctic wind down my neck, comparing the price per ounce on oatmeal canisters. My eyes were burning, gritty from a day spent inhaling varnish fumes, and my brain was doing the mental gymnastics of a forensic accountant. I was calculating pennies because someone upstairs, specifically, in the master bedroom of the brownstone I paid for, thought that buying generic oats was a moral failing, a sign of spiritual decay. That was my life. My name is Claire Callahan. I am an art conservator. To the uninitiated, that means I take things that are damaged, cracked, peeling, and forgotten, and I make them look like time never laid a finger on them. I fill in the fissures of history. I stabilize the rot. In other words, I fix messes for a living. I am the person you call when the varnish yellows and the canvas begins to weep. I just didn't expect to marry into a mess that no amount of solvent could clean. We lived in a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. If you look at it from the street, especially in the golden hour of autumn, it is the stuff of architectural dreams. Tall, narrow, imposing, with intricate ironwork and windows that look like eyes watching the street. People, tourists, mostly would stop on the sidewalk, frame it with their phone cameras, and call it charming. They would sigh about the history, ignoring the fact that a house like that is basically a carnivorous organism made of brick and mortar. It was a money pit, with nice fenestration. Judith, my mother-in-law, didn't call it a house. She called it the Callahan home, capitalizing the words in her speech as if the structure came with a coat of arms and a royal decree. In reality, what it came with was a staggering mortgage, property taxes that could fund a small nation, exorbitant insurance premiums, drafty utilities, constant masonry repairs, and a steady stream of emergencies that Judith announced, like she was a town crier reading breaking news from the front. Lines of a war. "The boiler is making that noise again, Claire," she would say, sipping tea I bought from a cup I washed in a kitchen I renovated. "It sounds distressingly cheap." My husband, Andrew, was a junior architect at a boutique firm in the city. In public, Andrew was the picture of the modern, sensitive man. He was polite, he opened doors, he had a soft laugh that made people lean in. He was a good guy. But in private, within the gravitational pull of his mother, Andrew had a unique talent for turning into upholstery. He would blend into the sofa, the curtains, the wallpaper becoming inanimate whenever Judith entered the room. He was a master of camouflage, hoping that if he stayed still enough, the predator wouldn't notice him. His father, Harold, was the ghost in the machine. Harold had suffered a massive stroke about 18 months before everything detonated. He was a shadow of the man he used to be, confined to a wheelchair, his speech slurred, his right side paralyzed. He needed daily medication regimens that rivaled a hospital pharmacy, physical therapy exercises 3 times a day, and constant, rigid routines. Judith treated his care like an insult she had personally been handed by God. She viewed his bodily functions and his needs as a direct attack on her lifestyle. So, the routines became mine. Quietly. Incrementally. It started with, "Claire, can you just handle his morning meds? I'm overwhelmed." Then it was, "Claire, the therapist is here, let him in." Then, "Claire, he needs changing." And quietly, so did the bills. It wasn't that Andrew didn't contribute. He did. He paid for the groceries, the internet, the streaming services, the surface-level expenses of modern existence. But the heavy, ugly parts? The tectonic plates that kept the house from swallowing us whole? Those were mine. The mortgage auto-pays, the staggering home insurance, the pharmacy refills, the specialist co-pays, The heating oil. Judith didn't call it help. She didn't say, "Thank you." She called it your responsibility. Her logic was a twisted pretzel of entitlement. Andrew was her son. Harold was her husband. The brownstone was her ancestral seat. And I was the woman Andrew had brought into the family. In Judith's mind, my presence was a debt I was accruing, and I owed them interest compounded daily. The only person in that house who consistently treated me like a biological entity worthy of respect was my daughter, Paige. Paige was 12 years old, going on 40. She was funny, observant, and possessed the kind of hypervigilance that children develop when the adults around them are unstable. She could tell you what mood someone was in just by the way they closed a cabinet door, or how hard they set a coffee mug down on a coaster. She navigated the house like a bomb disposal expert, careful where she stepped, careful not to cut the wrong wire. She wasn't Andrew's biological child. I had Paige before I met Andrew. That biological detail mattered to exactly one person on Earth, Judith. Judith never said it outright in the beginning. She was too clever for that. Judith's cruelty was plausible deniability. It was in the pauses. It was in the introductions. When neighbors stopped by, Judith would gesture to us with a ring-clad hand and say, "This is Claire, Andrew's wife. And this is Claire's daughter. Asterisk. Claire's daughter. Asterisk." She would say it as if Paige belonged to the lost and found. Not my granddaughter. Not our girl. Not even our family. Just asterisk, Claire's. Asterisk. Like Paige was an accessory I had insisted on wearing, like a carry-on bag I refused to check at the gate. And Judith? Judith didn't like carry-ons. She preferred streamlined travel. In that house, love was a currency measured in bloodlines and obedience. Paige possessed neither, yet my daughter still tried. God, she tried. It broke my heart to watch it. She would hold doors open for Judith, waiting for a smile that never came. She would pick up her own plate immediately after eating. She would run to help Harold with a blanket if it slipped off his knees, tucking it in with a gentleness that Judith couldn't muster. Normal, kind kid things. Judith would stare at her during these moments, not with warmth, but with suspicion, like Paige was attempting some sort of long-con fraud. Then she would look at me, her eyes flat and hard, and say, "She's very times comfortable times here, isn't she?" In Judith's speak, that translated to, asterisk, "Your offspring is taking up oxygen in my palace." Asterisk. Andrew would give me the look. You know the one. The plead in the eyes, the slight cringe of the shoulders. The look that said, asterisk, "Please just ignore it. Don't start a war. I can't handle the noise." So, I ignored it. I swallowed the rage that tasted like bile. I ignored it because I wasn't trying to start anything. I was trying to keep my daughter safe, keep a roof over her head, and keep my credit score from flatlining. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself Andrew was just stressed and would eventually grow a spine. I told myself Judith was grieving Harold's condition and would soften with time. That was adorable of me. Truly, the naivety was almost charming. And then, the barometer dropped. The storm broke. Samantha came home. Samantha arrived on a rainy Thursday in late spring, descending upon us like a weather system with luggage. She was Andrew's younger sister, 30 years old, going on 16. She was freshly divorced, though to hear her tell it, she had escaped a gothic horror novel. She stepped out of the taxi, dressed like she was walking into a Vogue Times photo shoot, oversized sunglasses despite the rain, a trench coat that cost more than my car, and heels that had no business on Brooklyn cobblestones. She was not dressed like a woman moving back in with her parents. She was dressed like the star of a tragedy. She showed up with 3 oversized suitcases, hard-shelled, gleaming black with shiny gold hardware. Each case looked like it had its own ego. Judith rushed to the front door, throwing it open as if she had been waiting at a train station for a soldier returning from the front lines of World War II. "My baby!" Judith sobbed, the sound theatrical and wet. She grabbed Samantha's face between her hands, squeezing the cheeks. "My poor, sweet baby." Samantha sniffled dramatically, removing her sunglasses to reveal perfectly applied waterproof mascara. "They were monsters, Mom," she said, her voice trembling with a practiced vibrato. She collapsed onto the entryway bench, avoiding the wet umbrella stand. His mother. She made me do dishes. Asterisk. Every day. Asterisk. Judith gasped, clutching her chest as if Samantha had just described waterboarding. They don't deserve you, Judith hissed, her eyes narrowing at the invisible enemies. You're home now. You are safe. You will rest. Then, the warmth vanished from her face. She turned on her heel, her gaze landing on me. The transition was instant from loving matriarch to prison warden. She pointed a manicured finger at me. Claire, she said, juice, and take her bags upstairs. No, hello. No, how are you? No, do you mind? Just a task list. I didn't move right away. I stood there, anchoring myself to the floorboards, because I was holding Paige's hand. Paige had been doing homework at the kitchen table and had wandered over when she heard the commotion of the arrival. She was looking at Samantha's suitcases with wide eyes, as if they might tick and explode. Samantha, realizing the attention wasn't fully on her, noticed Paige. She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile a cat gives a bird before the pounce, a smile of assessment, of calculating play. Well, Samantha said, dragging out the vowel. Who's this? Judith answered before Paige could open her mouth. This is Claire's daughter, she said. Asterisk Paige. Asterisk. Just the name. No affection attached. No title. Samantha's eyes flicked over Paige, dissecting her in seconds. She looked at the scuffed sneakers, the oversized hoodie, the way Paige stood protectively close to my leg. Then she looked at me, her eyes gleaming with a toxic sort of amusement. So, Samantha said lightly, tossing her hair back, she helps around the house, right? It was a question shaped like a statement, a bear trap hidden in leaves. Paige's fingers tightened around mine, her grip sweaty. She's 12, I said, my voice level but cold. Samantha shrugged, examining her fingernails. I was babysitting at 12. It builds character. God knows kids these days need it. Judith nodded vigorously, looking at Samantha like she had just recited the Sermon on the Mount. Exactly, Judith said. Paige needs discipline. She's too idle. Paige's face went still. A mask descended the blankness she used to survive. She was used to Judith's little digs, the microaggressions about her hair or her quietness. But this was different. This wasn't just a dig. This was a shifting of tectonic plates. This was about ownership. Andrew appeared in the doorway then, looking startled and disheveled, holding a coffee mug. Sam? He said, blinking. Samantha launched herself at him with a high-pitched squeal, abandoning her exhaustion to wrap her arms around his neck, crying into his shoulder. Andy! Oh God, Andy! Andrew hugged her awkwardly, patting her back, his eyes meeting mine over her shoulder. He looked terrified. He looked like he was waiting for instructions on how to breathe. I didn't give him any. I knew how this machinery worked. Samantha would cry, Judith would rage, Andrew would fold like cheap cardstock, and I would be expected to pour the concrete to smooth everything over. The first demand came before dinner. Samantha walked into my studio. I should explain the studio. It was the one place in the house that was mine. It was a converted back room on the first floor, north-facing with large windows that let in the cool, consistent light necessary for color matching. It wasn't a craft corner. It wasn't a hobby room. It was a laboratory. There was a locked metal cabinet for solvents and chemicals, acetone, ethanol, xylene. There were magnifying lamps, ventilation hoods, scalpels, and cotton swabs. And on my easel, dominating the center of the room, was a 19th-century seascape I was restoring under contract for a private collector. It was a moody, tempestuous piece, depicting a ship battling a dark squall. It was the kind of painting people insure for more than my annual salary. The kind of painting you do not breathe on wrong, let alone touch, unless you enjoy bankruptcy and lawsuits. Samantha stepped in like she owned the deed to the sunlight. Oh, she said, scanning the room, her hand trailing along a workbench disturbingly close to a tray of pigments. This is bright. I like it. I stood up slowly from my stool, removing my magnifying loupe. Hi, I said, positioning my body between her and the easel. She turned, startled, as if she hadn't expected the room to contain an actual person. Judith said I can have this room, she chirped. I blinked once, slowly. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Judith doesn't get to assign my studio, I said. Samantha pouted, her lower lip jutting out. It's just a room, she said, waving a hand dismissively. I need light and space. I'm times healing *, Claire. I have trauma. You can heal in the guest room, I said, or the upstairs office, or the library. She wrinkled her nose. That office smells like old man, and the guest room faces the alley. It's depressing. I need times energy *. I didn't respond. I just stared at her. She smiled again. That same cat smile. Okay, she said brightly, turning on her heel. I'll tell Mom. Of course she would. Judith arrived 10 minutes later, her footsteps heavy and deliberate in the hallway. She stood in the doorway and stared at my easel like it was a pile of dirty laundry. You're painting again, she said, the word dripping with disdain. Judith thought anything that wasn't finance or real estate was a waste of time. I'm working, I corrected, pulling on a fresh pair of nitrile gloves. Judith scoffed. Pictures, she said. You act like you're curing cancer. It's a hobby, Claire. I didn't argue. I learned long ago that explaining the chemistry of conservation to Judith was like trying to explain poetry to a rock. Samantha can't have this room, I said simply. Judith's face tightened, the skin around her eyes crinkling. She needs it, she snapped. She's my daughter. She is in crisis. And this is my studio, I said. I have contracts. I have hazardous chemicals in here. It is not a lounge. Judith's eyes narrowed into slits. She took a step into the room. And whose house are you in? She demanded. I held her gaze. The silence stretched, tight as a drum skin. The funny thing about that question, I could answer it honestly. I could answer it legally. I could answer it with receipts, bank statements, and tax returns. But I didn't. Not yet. The trap wasn't ready to be sprung. Instead, I pivoted. Paige is not going to be your maid either, I said. Judith blinked, surprised by the change of subject. Oh, don't be dramatic, she said, waving her hand. A few chores won't kill her. It teaches responsibility. No, I repeated. She picks up after herself. She does not serve Samantha. Judith's voice dropped to a low, dangerous register. You're getting mouthy, Claire, she warned. I smiled slightly. Because mouthy is what people say when they're losing control, Judith. And Judith hated losing control more than she hated generic oatmeal. That night at dinner, the hierarchy was made physical. Judith served Samantha first a heaping portion of roast chicken, then Andrew. Then she prepared a pureed meal for Harold. Then she served herself. Paige got her plate last. It was slid across the table like an afterthought, landing with a clatter. After dinner, Judith wiped her mouth with a linen napkin and snapped her fingers. Actually snapped them. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet dining room. Paige, she said, clear the table. Paige looked up from her plate, a piece of broccoli halfway to her mouth. Her eyes flicked to me, wide and panicked. I placed my hand over Paige's wrist. You can take your plate to the sink, honey, I said gently. Paige nodded, scrambled up, and took her plate. Judith's nostrils flared. And the rest, she insisted, pointing at the mess of bones and gravy boats. No, I said. My voice was soft, but it carried. Judith slammed her fork down. This is why she's spoiled, she shouted, pointing at Paige as if she were Exhibit A in a murder trial. She contributes nothing. She is a leech. Paige froze in the kitchen doorway. Andrew stared at his plate, fascinated by the pattern of the china. Harold stared out the window, his mind perhaps wandering to a time when his house wasn't a battlefield. Samantha? Samantha smirked. She took a sip of wine and watched the show. And that was the moment I realized something important. They weren't going to stop. Not with the studio. Not with Paige. Not ever. Unless something forced them. Unless the laws of physics in this house were violently rewritten. So, I started watching. I started listening. I started collecting. Because if there's one thing I'm good at, it's restoration. And sometimes, restoration begins with removing the rot. You have to scrape away the old yellowed varnish to see the cracks underneath. The next few weeks were a slow-motion lesson in entitlement. Judith woke up every morning with a new plan for my time. One day, it was, Samantha needs breakfast in bed because she's depressed. Another day it was, Samantha needs her laundry done properly. No, not by you, Claire. Have Paige learn how to iron silk. Samantha started leaving her existence everywhere. Dishes in the sink with lipstick stains on the rims, wet towels rotting on the hallway floorboards. She borrowed my expensive, salon-grade hairdryer and complained it wasn't powerful enough. Paige tried to stay invisible, which is what prey animals do. She spent more time in her room. She read books, she drew, she stayed quiet. And then Judith started assigning times her. Not politely. Not, help me, sweetheart. Orders. Paige, bring Samantha water. Paige, take the trash out, it smells. Paige, vacuum the stairs, you tracked dirt in. The first time Paige obeyed, she did it with that careful, terrified expression kids wear when they are trying to de-escalate an adult. I stopped her halfway down the stairs, the vacuum cleaner heavy in her small hands. Hey, I said softly, crouching down to her eye level. Come here. She looked at me like she was in trouble. Grandma said. I know what she said, I interrupted gently. But you don't have to do anything for Samantha, not unless you want to. Paige swallowed hard. She said I have to, she whispered. She said I have to earn my keep. My heart stopped for a beat, then restarted with a violent thud. I say you don't, I replied. You are a child. Your job is school and being 12. Paige's shoulders relaxed a fraction. Then she frowned, a deep crease between her brows. But it makes her mad. I know, I said, smoothing her hair. Let me handle the madness. Paige nodded, trusting me. But Judith did not enjoy being handled. The next confrontation came on a Sunday morning. Judith barged into the kitchen, a clipboard in hand, and slapped a notepad down on the granite island in front of me. 15 people, she announced. Brunch next Saturday at noon. I stared at the page. It was a battle plan. Menu items, quiche, smoked salmon, pastries, decorations, timing, seating charts. You'll do it, Judith said. Samantha needs a welcome home party. She needs to reconnect with her circle. This is family. I didn't look up from my coffee. Order catering, I said. Judith blinked rapidly, as if I had started speaking Aramaic. What did you say? I said, order catering, I repeated, meeting her eyes. Or Samantha can cook for her friends. She's 30. She has hands. Judith's mouth tightened into a prune. You'll do it, she said, her voice rising. You live here. You eat our food. You use our heat. Andrew wandered in, half awake, scratching his stomach. He saw the tension and did the thing he always did. He tried to smooth the air without solving the problem. Claire, he murmured, pouring coffee. It's just brunch. Mom's stressed. Let's just help out. It's labor, I corrected, and I have a deadline on the seascape. Samantha appeared in the doorway then, wearing a silk robe that cost more than my first car. She had clearly been eavesdropping. Her eyes got wet on cue. She hates me, Samantha wailed, throwing her hands up. She wants me to suffer. I just wanted to see my friends. I didn't even blink. I want you to stop treating me like staff, I said. Judith slammed her hand on the counter. The sound echoed. Listen to me carefully, she said, her voice low, venomous. As long as I am alive, I run this house. I decide who does what. Then she looked toward the hallway, where Paige was standing, holding her backpack like a shield. You are lucky I let you in. Judith snapped at my daughter. Both of you. Paige went pale. And I felt it. That clean, cold clarity. It's a physical sensation like a fever breaking. It's the part of you that stops pleading and starts planning. 2 nights later, it happened. The event that severed the last thread. I stepped out of my studio to wash my hands. 2 minutes, that's all. I left the door cracked because the ventilation fan was running. When I came back, the studio door was ajar wide open. My stomach tightened. I walked in. Samantha was standing over the easel. She was holding my solvent bottle, a mixture of ethanol and acetone, designed to strip aged varnish. In her other hand, her phone was propped up, the camera lens facing her. Guys, she was saying to the camera, doing a live stream, I'm literally watching her restore this antique painting. It's so satisfying. I froze. Samantha, I said, my voice flat. Put that down. She jumped. Startled by my voice, her hand jerked, the bottle tilted. Time did something weird. Everything slowed down, the air thickened into syrup. I watched a thin, clear stream of solvent splash out of the nozzle. It arched through the air and landed on the lower right corner of the canvas. It wasn't just water. It was a chemical stripper. The solvent hit the 150-year-old paint. Immediately, a reaction began. A smear. A bloom. The dark blues of the painted ocean began to lift, dissolving into a muddy, terrifying gray. The history was melting. Samantha looked at the wet patch like it was a spill on a countertop. "Oh my God," she whispered, looking at the camera, then at the painting. "It's fine, right? It's just cleaner." "It's not cleaner," I said quietly. My entire body was vibrating. "You just dissolved the glaze layer." Paige appeared behind me in the doorway, drawn by the tension. She saw the painting. She saw my face. She froze. Samantha's eyes darted to Paige. And because Samantha was a narcissist who couldn't handle shame, she immediately tried to redirect the blame. "Why is times she times even in here?" Samantha snapped, pointing at Paige. "She shouldn't be allowed around chemicals." She distracted me. I turned slowly. The rage in me was so hot it felt cold. "Get out," I said. "It was an accident," Samantha cried. "Get out." Samantha stormed out, already rehearsing how to be the victim for Judith. Paige stayed silent, trembling. I crouched down in front of her and took her hands. They were ice cold. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said immediately. Paige swallowed. "She's going to blame me. Grandma will believe her." "She can try," I said, "but I saw it. I know what happened." Paige nodded, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. Then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A bank alert. "Transfer complete." I frowned, confused. I hadn't bought anything. My stomach dropped. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. My personal savings account. My escape fund. My emergency money. It was gone. Not a few $100s. A massive, 5-figure chunk. Transferred to a joint account I shared with Andrew, an account I rarely used. I walked into the living room. Andrew was sitting there, staring at the TV, a distinct look of panic on his face. I held up my phone. "Where is my money?" I asked. Andrew's throat bobbed. He couldn't meet my eyes. "It was for Samantha," he said. I blinked once. "For Samantha," I repeated. "She needed it." He rushed, the words tumbling out. "She's going through a divorce, Claire. She doesn't have access to her accounts. Her ex froze everything. Mom was freaking out. She said we had to help." "You stole my savings," I said very clearly. "That account is in my name, solely." Andrew's face went red. "I didn't steal," he snapped, defensive now. "We're married. What's yours is mine. It's a loan, Claire. She'll pay it back." "You moved money without my permission," I said. "To give to your sister, who literally times destroyed a client's painting in my studio." Andrew froze. His mouth opened, then closed. "What?" "She spilled solvent on the seascape," I said. "I have to call the insurance company. I have to call the client. I might get sued. And you just emptied my safety net." Judith's voice drifted from upstairs. She was on the phone, her voice carrying through the vents. She was telling someone, probably a relative, how unstable and selfish I had been lately. Andrew's shoulders sagged. "We'll fix it," he whispered. "We're a family." I tilted my head. "You?" I asked. "Or me?" He didn't answer. He looked at the floor. And that was the moment I stopped trying to save the marriage. Because it's hard to stay married to someone who treats you like a natural resource to be mined. And it's impossible to stay married to someone who lets your child be treated like trash. That night, Paige slept in my bed. Not because she was scared of the dark, but because she was scared of the people in the house. I lay awake, listening to the creaks of the old building, the wind rattling the expensive windows I paid to repair. I made a decision. Not a dramatic, weeping decision, a practical one, like assessing a damaged canvas. Some damage isn't accidental, it's intentional. And you don't repair intentional damage by being nicer. You remove the source of the rot. The next morning, Judith acted like none of it mattered. Like the painting was just a picture. Like my savings were family money. Like Paige was a nuisance ruining the vibe. That weekend, the brunch happened anyway. I didn't cook. Judith, furious but cornered, ordered catering last minute and screamed at the delivery driver until the food appeared. The house was full of people, Judith's friends, Samantha's superficial circle, distant cousins. It was loud. Champagne corks popped. Samantha wore a satin dress and filmed herself walking down the staircase like she was in a reality show, laughing her tinkling, fake laugh. I stayed on the periphery. Paige stayed close to me. At one point, Samantha, flushed with wine and attention, shoved a heavy silver tray of appetizers toward Paige. "Hold this," she said, not even looking at her. "Pass them around." Paige glanced at me. I shook my head slightly. Paige stepped back. "No," she said. Her voice was small but steady. Samantha's eyes narrowed. The conversation nearby stopped. "Excuse me?" she snapped. Judith swooped in immediately, sensing defiance like a shark senses blood. "What did you just say?" Judith demanded. Paige swallowed, trembling, but she stood her ground. "I said no," she repeated. Judith turned her fury on me. "Teach your child manners," she hissed. "She is embarrassing us." "My daughter has manners," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. "She's not your server. She is a guest in her own home." Judith's lips curled into a sneer. "She's not my anything," Judith said cold. "She is a charity case." The room felt too quiet. The air was sucked out of the space. Then Judith pointed. Not at me. At Paige. Like Paige was a stain on the Persian rug. "Your daughter is a nobody in our family," Judith announced, loudly. Loud enough that the cousins by the window stopped chewing. "She has no blood here. She is nothing." Then she added, like she was issuing a verdict from the throne. "So take her and get out." Paige's face crumpled. Not into tears, but into shock. She looked like she had been slapped. Andrew inhaled sharply. "Mom," he started, weak and pathetic. Judith cut him off with a glare that could peel paint. Samantha smirked, enjoying the bloodshed. And I smiled. Not a sweet smile. Not a fake, keep the peace smile. It was the smile of someone who has just watched the enemy walk onto a landmine. "I'm flying to LA, I said pleasantly. Judith blinked. "What?" I said. "I'm taking her," I repeated. "We're going to Los Angeles." "Good," Judith scoffed. "Go. Run away." I turned to Paige. "Go pack a bag," I said gently. "Just your essentials. The rest we'll buy." Paige hesitated, eyes wide. "We're leaving?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "Right now." Judith recovered enough to laugh. A harsh, barking sound. "You don't scare me," she snapped. "This is my house. You have nowhere to go." I tilted my head. "Is it?" I asked. Judith stiffened. "What did you say?" I didn't answer immediately. I walked to the entryway table where the mail was stacked in Judith's usual chaotic pile. And I picked up a folder, a blue folder I had placed there that morning, deliberately. I walked back to the center of the room. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of the deed, the mortgage statements, and the refinancing paperwork from 2 years ago. The paperwork they had all signed without reading because Andrew was too busy, and Judith didn't do details. I held them up. "My name," I said, pointing to the line. "Right there. Sole borrower on the refinance. Primary lien holder." Judith's face changed. It wasn't anger anymore. It was recognition. It was fear. Andrew went pale. He knew. Deep down, he knew who paid the bills. "You're bluffing," Judith whispered. I shook my head. "I've been paying the mortgage," I said calmly, "from my account. For years, because Andrew couldn't cover the balloon payments and your trust fund ran dry in 2019. Judith's mouth opened, closed, fish out of water. "No," she said sharply. "You wouldn't." I smiled. "I already did." I held up my phone. "Autopay canceled," I said. "I did it this morning, quietly, after booking 2 one-way tickets to California. I have a job offer there, a museum." Judith's face drained of color. She looked at the guests, who were now pretending to examine the wallpaper. "You're going to ruin us," Judith whispered. I shrugged. "I'm not ruining anything," I said. I'm just not saving you anymore. There is a difference. Paige came downstairs with her backpack and a small duffel. She looked terrified, but hopeful. I took her hand. Judith stepped forward like she was going to block the door. Andrew didn't move. He just watched. I looked at Judith one last time. You should have thought about this before you called my daughter a nobody, I said. Then I opened the heavy oak door, and we walked out into the bright, blinding afternoon sun. The first week after we left, my phone didn't stop vibrating. Judith called 17 times. Andrew texted paragraphs of apologies followed by paragraphs of blame. Samantha sent voice notes long, sobbing performances where she claimed she was being targeted by creditors and it was all my fault. I didn't answer. Not because I was playing games, because I was busy. I had accepted a 1-year contract in Los Angeles at a prestigious conservation lab. The pay was excellent, the work was serious, and I had professional respect. But more importantly, I had air. Paige adjusted faster than I expected. Kids are resilient when you remove the boot from their neck. She stopped flinching every time a door shut hard. She slept through the night. She started humming while she did homework. We got a small apartment near the beach. We ate oatmeal because we liked it, not because it was generic. Back in Brooklyn, the house started falling apart. It wasn't just physical entropy, though that happened too. It was financial gravity. Without my income and my management, the bills piled up like snowdrifts. Overdue notices, late fees, calls from the loan servicer. Judith tried to fix it the only way she knew how, by screaming at customer service representatives. It turns out, screaming does not pay a mortgage. Harold's routines fell apart. Med refills slipped. Appointments got missed. The home health aide quit because Judith insulted her. Harold ended up in the hospital again. Andrew called me from a waiting room, his voice raw. "Dad's in trouble," he whispered. I closed my eyes. I felt a pang of guilt not for Judith but for Harold. He was innocent in this. "Is he stable?" I asked. Andrew swallowed. "They don't know yet. Mom." She didn't know the dosage. She messed up his meds. I was quiet for a second. "I left a list," I said, "taped to the fridge." "She threw it away," Andrew admitted. "She said she didn't need your instructions." I stared out the window of my apartment, watching palm trees sway. They looked so flexible, so unlike the rigid brick of Brooklyn. "I'm not your emergency plan anymore, Andrew," I said softly. Then, I hung up. Samantha's situation didn't improve either. Her divorce lawyer quit because she stopped paying him. Her credit cards maxed out. Collectors started calling the house line. The brownstone turned into a pressure cooker, Judith blaming Andrew. Samantha blaming everyone. Andrew drowning in it all. Months passed. I filed for divorce remotely. I didn't go back. I focused on the work, on Paige, on rebuilding a life that didn't revolve around managing other people's chaos. Then, one afternoon in November, my attorney called. Matthew Collins. A calm voice with sharp teeth. "They've been served with a pre-foreclosure default notice," he said. "The bank is moving forward. They haven't paid in 4 months." I leaned back in my chair. Paige was at the counter, laughing at something on her phone. "Okay," I said. Matthew paused. "You're not surprised," he observed. "No," I said. "I'm prepared." "They reached out," he added. "Judith called my office. They want you to come fix it. They want a meeting." I smiled. "Of course they do." A week later, I flew back to New York, not alone. With Paige, who insisted on coming, and with Matthew. We walked into that brownstone like we were buying it, because, effectively, we were. The house smelled different. It smelled like stale takeout, dust, and panic. Judith opened the door. She looked older, not in a dignified way. In a hollow, stressed way. Her hair wasn't perfectly coiffed. Her clothes looked lived in. Andrew stood behind her, pale and exhausted. Harold sat in his wheelchair near the staircase, staring at nothing. Samantha was on the couch, scrolling her phone, looking thinner and harder. Judith forced her voice into something sharp, trying to summon the old authority. "Well," she sneered, "you came back." I didn't sit. I didn't take off my coat. I nodded toward Matthew. "This is my attorney," I said. Judith's eyes widened. Samantha scoffed from the couch. "Oh my God. Are you being dramatic? We just need a loan. Matthew opened his folder. I'm here to discuss options, he said evenly. You have very few, Judith snapped. This is times our times home. Matthew didn't blink. It is a property secured by a loan, he said. And the loan is in default. Foreclosure is pending. You will be evicted in approximately 60 days. Judith's mouth opened. Andrew swallowed hard. Samantha's phone lowered. I stepped forward. I spoke with the lender, I said. I have negotiated a deal. They will allow reinstatement and a refinance to avoid foreclosure. Judith's eyes lit up with desperate hope. See? She snapped at Andrew. I told you. She'll fix it. I held up a hand. Not for free, I said. Judith's hope froze. I will only take over the loan and pay the arrears if the property is transferred entirely into my name, I said. A quitclaim deed, signed by all of you, today. Judith's face went white. Andrew took a shaky step forward. Claire, he pleaded. Come on, it's my family's house. It's my inheritance. I looked at him. For the first time in years, I didn't feel pity. I felt nothing. Your family treated my daughter like trash, I said. And you watched. You let them. You stole from me to fund their abuse. Andrew's eyes filled with tears. Please, he whispered. Samantha snorted. This is extortion, she muttered. Matthew looked at her. It's leverage, he corrected. And it's legal. Judith's hands trembled. She looked at the walls, the ceiling, the kingdom she was losing. You're taking everything from us, she whispered. I tilted my head. No, I said. I'm taking back what I paid for. I'm securing my daughter's future. Judith's voice cracked. What about us? Where will we go? I looked at Paige. She stood beside me, tall, wearing a cool jacket, looking like herself. I turned back to Judith. What about her? I asked. Remember? You said she was a nobody. Judith flinched. She couldn't say it now. Not with the deed on the table. I nodded once. Sign, I said. Or don't. But if you don't, I walk out that door, and the bank takes the house. You lose everything. If you sign, I will give you 6 months to find a new place, rent-free. After that, you leave. It took 15 minutes. 15 minutes of Judith shaking, Andrew pleading, Samantha sighing like she was the victim of stationery. Then, they signed. Matthew collected the papers. Good, he said. We'll proceed. Judith looked at me, wet-eyed, defeated. You're evil, she whispered. I nodded once. If protecting my child makes me evil, I said calmly, then yes, I am the villain of your story. I can live with that. Then I turned to Andrew. The divorce papers are in the packet, I said. Sign those too. Andrew's face collapsed. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. Because if someone lets a 12-year-old get called a nobody, they aren't confused. They're committed. I took Paige's hand. We walked out. And this time, I didn't look back. A year later, Paige and I were still in Los Angeles. We weren't glamorous. We weren't performing for anyone. We were peaceful. Paige joined an art club, made friends, laughed loudly again. She stopped apologizing for existing. As for the brownstone, it was in my name. I hired a team to renovate it. I did it slowly, carefully, the way I restore paintings. I removed the rot. I stabilized the structure. I painted over the gloomy colors. And then I sold it. I didn't sell it out of spite. I sold it for closure. I took the profit and put it into a trust for Paige. Sometimes, late at night, Paige would ask me quietly, "Do you think they ever felt bad?" I'd look at her and say, "It doesn't matter, sweetie, because guilt doesn't undo damage. Action does." They made their choice, and I made mine. I chose my daughter, finally. So, tell me, did I go too far? Or did I just finally do enough? Let me know in the comments. And if you're new here, subscribe for more stories about fixing messes, both on Canvas and in life.